Just envision that.
Nope. I'm good.
Long wait.
The Chiefs offseason began with quite a surprise as the Chiefs tagged Trey Smith in the with the franchise tag. It's quite surprising if you ask me. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the ramifications of that, what it means for the offseason, what it means for the tackle situation, all that. Here we go.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank. If you're thinking about starting a business or know someone who is, check out Emprise Bank's SBA loans. It's always good to know your options, and they can be your partner in possible.
Welcome into a live edition of the KC Laboratory presented by Emprise Bank. Member FDIC, our tremendous partners in possible here at KCSN. I'm Ken Swanson. I am here with Matthew Lane. Matthew, I will just say, watching you drive your Ram with great technique on video,
pretty poor.
Was one of the I mean, I think you did a great job recovering leverage. You routing up your dog and you doing O-line drills against your farm animals, I think it's a bit that needs to continue.
Listen, I'll try to keep thinking of more. We got a few more ideas up there in the old tinkerer right now. But yeah, listen, the Ram, it's that time of year. The Ram's trying to, he's trying to do his thing. He's trying to say that he owns the yard back there. And sometimes every now and then you just gotta hit him with a quick 2-hand strike and let him know what's up. Problem is, it's really hard to get leverage on a 4-legged animal. Let me tell you guys what, it's really difficult to get up underneath a 4-legged animal. So you kind of just have to react. You kind of have to recover. And I drop the anchor, then we get the feet drive. So it was okay. Wasn't the best rep, but he was starting to get mad at that point in time. So we just had to hang on for dear life and go for a ride.
Well, because the Chiefs didn't win the Super Bowl, I think that's been the highlight of 2025 so far.
Kind of looked like their offensive line in the Super Bowl, if I'm being honest.
You might have. I mean, yes, the Ram was Joe Tooney out at left tackle, just out of position, and
lacked the reach,
and you were a force to be reckoned with. But hey, thanks everyone hanging out with us. We're really excited to get back on. I was really hyped to do this show. I love the offseason stuff. I like talking about the draft, free agency. I like seeing the plan for the Chiefs unfold, like what this version of the 2025 Chiefs is going to look like. And, there's, I think, a lot of ways that this thing can go. We'll talk about that here in a little bit, but we'll start with the biggest news of the day. Still biggest news going on this last week since we last talked is the Chiefs will be franchise tagging Trey Smith. They have elected to do that. They are going to currently he's a $23.4 million cap hit towards 2025. That means obviously the Chiefs, if they are going to keep him on that tag number, are going to have to do a lot of work to get under the salary cap to be cap compliant by the middle of March. But let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. Maddie Lane, were you surprised when the Chiefs put the franchise tag on Trey Smith?
Yeah, I think so. Well, initially, yes, because I think we talked about it a few times. You and I were both in lockstep here that we thought that there was a pretty good chance that the Chiefs were going to have a new starting right guard and it was going to be somebody on the roster. I think, we thought it would be a little bit of a competition, but we didn't think that it was going to be them bringing back Trey Smith. Now, that's not a sure thing yet, right? There's still the option to tag and trade Trey Smith. It's still available. I want to say it's still a possibility. We haven't had a great read on this situation so far. So who's to say that, we are right or wrong on what this is going to be. However, I think throwing a tag out there, potentially locking yourself down in with like that cap hit as free agency starts, after doing that last year, after having a battle with Orlando Brown Jr., having done that, I don't feel like the Chiefs would be wanting to do that again as free agency starts and be that cash strapped going into it. So I have a feeling that I'm leaning towards Trey Smith is back as the starting right guard next year, which I do think surprised me a little bit. I was not anticipating that happening, especially because it still sounds like, listening to all the insiders and the buzz coming away from the NFL Combine, is he's about to get paid big money. So I don't know where you fell on that, but I was still a little surprised by it.
I was surprised by it just because, First off, I mean, there were reports indicating that he wasn't going to be tagged and they weren't expecting. And I think there's a lot of surprise that the Chiefs eventually went down that direction. So like, I think part of me has been trying to figure out, because like I do believe, I think there was some, there's some reporters I trust out here there that were giving the news. So I do think that, something probably changed, right? Fundamentally, like I do believe that there was a plan a week ago for the Chiefs not to tag to tag Trey Smith, and here they are, right? So I think grappling with like, okay, what's changed over the last week has been one of the things I've been trying to think through a little bit and kind of go through all that. And because Trey Smith, I would be, I was stunned they trade him or tagged him, but I'd also be stunned if he played on the tag, right? Like that. I saw something from Josh Norris that said, the Chiefs' current cap liabilities for 2025 are $97 million roughly, which is a very expensive offensive line when you've got Jawan Taylor, Joe Tooney, Trey Smith's tag, Creed Humphrey's not the cheapest, his contract's going to start kicking in here. So, this is an expensive offensive line, and I don't think he's going to be playing on the tag. So I think there's a lot that I'm trying to work through. Like what changed? Why are the Chiefs going this route? What do they have cooking? Because there's definitely something going on behind what the plans are. And is it just they feel good? They feel that they're close to a contract extension. Do they feel like they can hold Trey Smith as leverage and they can get something resolved quickly via tag and trade? Like that could be the case too, right? Like I think those are two scenarios that make some sense where, and they're two entirely different ones, but like, I think those are the two directions. Like, I don't know, like trying to figure out what changed, over the last week.
Okay.
I have some theories.
Here's what changed. They sat down. Andy Reid did a lot of different interviews and stuff like that coming out of the combine and everything. And Brett Veach was there too, because both these guys did interviews. But if you listen to Andy, something that stuck to me is after the Super Bowl, there's like a quote unquote, as he said it, like a mourning period. And what he does is he said he sends everybody out of the building for 10 days. Then they reconvene, and it sounds like, and maybe he does his personal exit interviews with players before those 10 days, and then it's 10 days for all staff out of the building would be my assumption. But the staff is out of the building, and I'm sure some guys are working at home, but it's not the whole collective unit. They take some time off. Then right before the combine, you all get back together. You start talking. You now have the college scouts. You have the pro scouts. You have everybody in the building. They sat down and they said, here's our list of free agent tackles. Here's our list of draft tackles. Show me a name you like. And nobody either could agree. They didn't like the options. The options that were available are going to be too expensive, whether in draft capital or in price tag. And they said, hey, there's no way that we are going to be able to find a left tackle, like a surefire left tackle upcoming in this draft. So what do? We're going to have to patchwork that spot together again. So let's bring back Trey Smith. Let's make sure our right guard is still good. Let's make sure from right tackle to left guard, we are as good as we can be if we have to have a patchwork left tackle still going into next year. No, it didn't go as we wanted last year, right? We can all admit that, but there's no reason to get potentially worse at two spots if we don't think we're going to improve the left tackle. Like that's my theory on how they got from, there's not a lot of momentum here to, here's the tag already offered.
I do wonder, and we're going to talk a little bit deeper into the tackle market here in a little bit, but I do wonder if there is some indications that they don't like where the tackle market is heading, which I think we'll talk more in a little bit about that. I do think there's a piece of that, right? It's like let's just continue to keep a strength to strength, or keep that interior offensive line strong because we know we're going to have to figure something out and get creative again at the tackle spot. I also wonder, like Trey Smith's going to know his number, right? Like he's going to know what his number is in the open market. I think there's some theories around, like maybe the Chiefs feel like they can come close to what his market looks like. Like maybe they feel good about their ability to get, close enough that Trey will accept a long-term extension and instead play on the tag. Maybe they have a good beat on the teams that would be, the most competitive, and maybe they feel like they have a good enough relationship that they don't have to hold they don't have to hold that cap hit for too long because they know they're going to be able to get a tag and trade going, right? These are the things that make me think that, like, maybe they feel like they have a pretty good pulse on like if it's going to be a Titan or a Trey could be a Titan or a Bear very easily, and Borgonzi and Poles aren't going to, screw the Chiefs over and let them, sit there with a huge cap hit for an extended period of time, like like what happened with L'Jarius Sneed last year, right? Like maybe it's something like that, or they just feel like they're going to be able to come to terms, quite quickly on a deal, quick enough that they're not going to be worrying all that much about that cap hit. Like I could see both of those scenarios. Those are tinfoil-ish, but like I could see either of those scenarios playing out too.
Yeah, I think that's still definitely an option. I don't think I've completely reset my mind to the NFL is going to pay offensive guards a high price and trade for one. So like I'm still struggling to wrap my mind around a tag and trade for an interior offensive lineman when we are talking about paying him the highest penalty. And everyone wants to go to like, oh, well, the cap went up, so maybe there's some extra money. I think that was even like floated around with what the Chiefs are doing. The cap percentage increase, I mean, it's there, but it wasn't enough to change the fact that, oh, we can now pay Trey Smith the highest paid guard if you like weren't already capable of doing so. Like it wasn't that much over expectation to all of a sudden make that okay. And so it's just, yeah, I still struggle to wrap my mind around a tag and trade making sense. If it's out there and they find it, that's awesome, right? I think that's great. It's just, I don't know. Trey Smith was a guy coming out of college that a lot of teams weren't okay with because of the medical issues. Now, there's been more time. He's played in the NFL without issues that anybody that we all know about. So maybe behind the scenes, that's not a concern at all. Or maybe it still is. Maybe, however many teams didn't pass him coming out of college aren't ready to pass him right now. They're not willing to go through that because they didn't feel comfortable with it 4 years ago. Maybe they still don't. So it's just, there's a lot that would go into a tag and trade of an interior offensive lineman while also paying him $22-ish million per year. And that's why I just don't feel like that's the most likely path. I think it's more likely that they were just like, hey, let's just be as good as we can be. We're trying to get the best 5 players, right? It's not about one position. It's the best 5 players they can get. Trey Smith is a very good one of your best 5. And their situation, he's probably their third best guy. Like that's a pretty darn good third best offensive lineman when you're trying to put a group together.
Yeah, and the tag and trade scenario to me would be very selective. Like I think it would have to be a team that they have a really good relationship with, like the Bears. And I don't think the tag and trade is for like a crazy big deal either, honestly. Like I think it would be like the value of a 4th round pick, a high 4 or something like that, very close to what the compensatory pick would look like. It's just you're guaranteeing yourself a pick instead of, hitting the compensatory market. Like that's what I think it would have to look like for them to be able to pull something off. And I think it'd have to be somebody like, Chicago or Tennessee that they have comfort with. So like, I think the path to that is very narrow. It's just like one of the things I was, theorizing and hypothesizing as like one of the, why they would put the tag on them. And are there other alternatives? Are there other avenues to why they would do it? That's one of the ones I was throwing out there. We'll take a break. We'll be back right after this. Maybe. Tucker's surprised.
Shop Chiefs tickets and more with no fees. Plus, save big with code KCSN at ticketsforless.com, the official ticket provider of KC Sports Network.
Success in real estate takes more than vision. It takes the right financial partner. When someone takes something rundown and turns it into something great, that's called a comeback story. Like Bryan Group. They take distressed properties here in KC, completely rework them, and then turn them into valuable real estate. But that kind of work needs the right bank behind it. Enter Emprise Bank. They're not about cookie-cutter loans. They saw Bryan Group's vision, backed them, and now they're making big moves in Kansas City real estate. Talk about your partner in possible. Emprise doesn't do one-size-fits-all financing. They invest in potential and back growth. Visit emprisebank.com/KC to learn more. Emprise Bank, member FDIC, equal housing lender.
All right, so we're going to get some clarity on the Trey Smith situation in the next couple weeks here. And I do think largely, Maddie, and I fully agree with you. I think I tweeted out the other day, like I wonder if the decision to tag Trey doesn't just simply have to do with how bad the tackle market is. Both free agency and the draft, like I do think that it's slim pickings out there. I've seen, like you've already got Alaric Jackson off the market. The Rams have extended him. I don't know if Alaric Jackson was ever going to be a great fit for the Chiefs just because he is a shorter arm tackle. There's a limited sample size. Price. I think there was some medical stuff with him coming out too. that, you know, he would have had to get cleared medically. He winds up going back to the team that has already cleared him and has already played him. So, you know, I think that all has, you know, some factoring in to do, right? But, you know, we've talked about the tackle situation here a little bit, but you're not getting the warm and fuzzies looking at being able to solve the tackle position in free agency or being able to fix it, you know, in the draft. And like one other thing I'll add to just the free agency market, right? So like, you know, we spent a couple weeks talking about tackle, right? So what's changed? Well, they probably found out what the price points are on some of these tackles, is what I'm guessing, over the course of the week at the NFL Combine, is my theory.
I mean, yeah, I think it's a combo, right? I mean, I'm sure that they found out talking to agents and stuff, some price ranges that these tackles were looking for. But again, I think there's a good chance that the pro scouts and the college scouts hadn't all convened together, and they definitely hadn't been talking to Andy Reid and Andy Heck. And I'm sure them and Brett Veach had conversations about it, but not everybody was involved. That wasn't until after they lost the Super Bowl, until after, like I said, I'm trying to put it together here, but Andy Reid talked about giving everybody a break. So they might simply just have not had all of these conversations until close to the combine time, close to it was time to pack everybody up and head in there. And then, now we get a chance to talk to a couple of these guys or see a little bit of the medicals and what we do or don't like, or just whatever it is. So just, I think there's just a good chance that they didn't know. They weren't sure what they had going on. And they just thought, okay, we can't, probably the initial thought is just trying to guess. We don't want to pay another interior offensive lineman big money when we have two already getting a lot of money. We really need to get better at left tackle. Let's figure out how we can do that. Let's look to free agency in the draft. That's just like the initial gut reaction. Well, once everybody gets together and they start going through it all, they're like, oh, we don't have options. The free agency market is big money to Ronnie Stanley, in which, you know, Kent's been pounding the table that they absolutely will not pay him, which he's probably right. And after that, it was what? Alaric Jackson with his, I mean, listen, the Chiefs are probably willing to fudge some arm length stuff for proven veterans.
Yes. And they have. I mean, that's what Mitch Schwartz was.
Mitchell Schwartz was definitely shoulder armed. He was also better than Alaric Jackson and still longer than Alaric Jackson. And how he
right tackle.
And how he played fit a little bit better to what Andy Heck wanted. I don't think Jackson was a great fit regardless. And he got a good chunk of money to be a not great fit. So and I don't even know if he was ever an option. So I'm looking at the prices are too high. There's not a good mid-tier free agent left tackle available. So now you start looking at the draft, and I want to tie in this question from Tucker, not Tucker D. Franklin though, because that there's no D there. We'll tie this into it here in a second. Thanks for the super chat as always, Tucker. So you start looking at the draft. It's like, well, one, it's not a very strong offensive tackle class in general, right? You don't even know. And then we get to the combine, and they kind of knew this or didn't know this before, but like, look at how many guys came in with 33-inch arms or under 33-inch arms that are listed as tackles, and they're supposed to be part of this tackle class. Like, that gets really tricky when you're a team like the Chiefs, who does have like this size threshold for tackles that you draft. They haven't drafted a tackle under 34-inch arms with Andy Reid in Kansas City. They haven't. So like, we're even stretching to get guys that hit the typical traditional NFL threshold at 33 inches. And now the Chiefs are above that. And there's very, very few guys in this draft class to hit it. So not only is it not strong, they don't have guys to hit their measurables. And then finally, like, they're at the end of round one. Who's going to be available? It's not going to be a day one ready to start offensive tackle that also hits these measurables that you also think can be pretty good in the long run. Those guys don't last until pick 31. So I just think a lot of things kind of fell into the place. And they're like, we're not finding a solution this year. We're just going to have to get by. In the process of not getting Patrick roughed up, let's bring back Trey Smith. And then, to answer Tucker's question, Mimbow, he's the best tackle in this class. I feel the most comfortable if I were to just say, here's the best tackle prospect, it's going to be Mimbow out of Missouri. Will Campbell, I think, is a great player. He's still probably my offensive line one. I feel a little bit more hesitant to say he's definitely a tackle.
Campbell and Membu both have identical grades for us currently in the KCSN draft guide. By the way, 300 pages of Chiefs-specific content available to you on April 7th, so you can get a rundown of all these prospects that we talk about. It's like 230 write-ups on prospects and how they fit the Chiefs, 300 pages of Chiefs-specific draft content. The link's in the description of the show if you would like to purchase that. You also get 3 months of KCSN Substack, which is also pretty cool as well. I mean, even Joshua Simmons, came back with like right at 33-inch arms. Like, there's not a ton of length in this class, or ideal length. The Chiefs typically prefer right 30. They like their tackles with longer arms and a better athletic profile. So it's like, Are they going to fudge a little bit this year? They're going to, squint a little bit harder than they might have in other years because, like, they're having a hard time. I do. I'm seeing Dan Moore getting a lot of love and, like, someone that's going to get paid a lot more than people think. And it's like, man, like, I don't know, man. I don't know if I'm all about that either. It's like, but I think that's the point. Is like I think the price points have even kind of started to get figured out a little bit more too. And it's like the Chiefs aren't willing to just pay, anyone just to come out there and be a warm body. And so like I think it's gonna be tough sledding again. And again, like this is champagne problems. I think there's two things going here, real quick. There's champagne problems a little bit because the Chiefs are picking in the 30s every year, and it's harder to do that. The Chiefs have had bad luck at left tackle too, because like Eric Fisher might have got cut anyway, but he gets hurt in the middle of the season or at the end of the season in 2020. And then, you get Orlando Brown back, and his situation was a mess, and he winds up getting paid a lot less than, he thought he was going to get paid. He found out, maybe hire an agent next time. I don't know. And then you've got, Donovan Smith, like you can't even bring him back on like a 1-year deal after you win a Super Bowl with him because we just find out today, Donovan Smith had a season-ending injury in May, which again, like we said on the show, there's a reason he wasn't signing with not just the Chiefs, but anyone last year. DJ Humphries, they have their issues with it. Like a lot of the guys that they've tried to bring in have their injury issues. Some of the reasons that they even brought him in is because they had injury issues and they were able to get them. But it's just like they've had bad luck. They're having a hard time figuring this thing out. And like, I think it's going to be tough to figure it out for a while.
Yeah. I mean, that's what it's going to be. And it's going to be, regardless of what they did with the right guard spot that we were talking about before, they're going to have to piece together left tackle. And so I think they just kind of looked at it and said, okay, let's be as solid as we can across the board while we try to piece it together. And now you got to figure out what that answer is. Hey, maybe Donovan Smith wants to come back and play again now that his hip's feeling better. So maybe he is an option again. I don't know how you do that at 32 years old. You miss a year because of injury and then you could have come back. But are the Chiefs really in a position to say no? Probably not. DJ Humphries, even farther removed from an injury, not getting injured as he first tries to return. That's probably a better option than he was last year. So you immediately look to the two veterans that have experience in the system, that at least kind of know what it is before you start looking at other journeyman-like, mediocre at best left tackle options that played for other teams that, the other teams don't really want. But like there is no good options. And then you got to figure out, do you have a young left tackle on your team you really still want to develop at left tackle? Or are you starting to prepare them for a position switch? Because, we got Brett Veach talking about how Kingsley's got, according to Brett Veach, according to Andy Heck, Kingsley has a really high upside at guard. And it sounds like Andy Heck might like him at guard. And it could be lying season. It could mean nothing. But that is something that, we've talked about for a little while now. So is he back into this cross-training protocol? Or is he now in the guard developmental path to replace Joe Thuney in the future? What's that going to be? So it's just, they have a lot of questions to answer, and I don't think any of the answers are very good.
Well, I'll say this about Kingsley. Okay. I like Kingsley. I do think he could be a very good guard in the National Football League. And you've heard a lot of lip service recently from Andy Reid specifically saying, oh man, he did some really good things at guard. And that was, I think, him saying Kingsley Suamataia is moving to guard. But the other thing to like kind of hint you at all this, there has been no report over the last 3 weeks even hinting that the Chiefs are considering Kingsley Suamataia at tackle. There is no one is quieting all of these rumors and all of this talk around the tackle position by saying, well, the Chiefs really like Kingsley Suamataia at tackle. They want to give him the first shot. You have not heard one person in media being like, well, the Chiefs really like Kingsley there, and he's going to be in the mix, and they think he has a chance to do it. I think that tells you a lot, that no one is trying to quiet down any of the rumors or any of the conversations surrounding Kingsley playing left tackle or around the left tackle situation. I think I saw today Bob Fesco said they're exploring every option whatsoever to try to fix the tackle position, be it free agency, be it draft, be it trade. They're exhausting all their options. How are you exhausting all your options if you think Kingsley Suamataia is your left tackle? I don't think the Chiefs think he's a tackle anymore. I think they think he's a guard. And so we'll see what happens with the guard situation. like right now the Chiefs don't have two guards, or three, or they already have two guards. I mean, and they've got their starters taken care of. We'll see if one of them is on the move potentially, and then maybe Kingsley slides in there and he's one of your starters in 2025. There's a lot remains to be seen, but I think Kingsley to tackle I think it's over.
Yeah, I mean, that's the way I was leaning. I think with Trey Smith coming back, it threw a little bit of a wrinkle into my thought process. It's not that changes everything. That means it's like most likely, again, I'm going back. I'm not operating under Trey Smith being a tag and trade guy, and we will cross that bridge if we get there. But it means that we are now embarking on like a 2-year developmental path to get to where we're going. Now, that's fine. Kingsley was young. He hadn't played guard since I believe like his freshman year that was even just a little bit. No, he didn't play guard at all at Oregon, I don't believe. I can't remember now, but either way, like it's a little bit longer of a developmental path, but a young player getting there eventually, that's fine. You live with it if it works out. And I think we saw enough to think that it works out. I also think that in the past saying, oh man, we have a tackle that became a guard, this really stinks, this is no longer worth it. Look at the NFL. They're valuing guards a lot higher than they ever have. It's important to have good guards. It's important to get cheap somewhere along this offensive line. If that comes for 2 years of a rookie contract of a guy after he's developed and learned to play guard, that's fine. Like that's not a negative like it would have been, a decade ago or anything like that. So I still think that's the most likely path they go around with Kingsley. It's just with Trey Smith back, with Joe Thuney also playing left guard right now and left tackle being so up in the air, it just does leave it a little bit more open than I would have said a week ago about him having another real crack at playing left tackle next season.
So I think Trey Smith in his being back on the roster, at least right now, and I would anticipate for the 2025 season, that's kind of the first domino to fall. And I think there's a lot of other directions that this thing can take. And I think that the path's been narrowed a little bit if we operate under the assumption that Trey Smith is back. And we're going to talk about that right after this.
We appreciate you supporting KC Sports Network by listening to our podcast. You have helped us become the highest ranked Chiefs podcast network in 2022 and 2023. And don't forget about our daily Substack newsletter, the best written analysis you can find on the Chiefs straight to your inbox every day. kcsn.substack.com.
I think we got a super chat here. And by the way, super chats go to the KCSN Foundation. So thank you for donating to the KCSN Foundation when you do submit those. We do appreciate that. We did have a question here. Who is a younger tackle you think is attainable via trade? Don't think they trade for an older guy. Honestly, here's the thing. That's a great question, but like that's the reality of it. I don't think there is a ton of great tackle options available via trade either. And like that's where I think the market shrinks even more. Is you're not going to be able to find, a young tackle. Young tackles stick on their roster. Capable tackles stick on rosters. If you like your tackle situation even a little bit, you're probably paying to keep them. And that's where it's tricky. Is you're not going to have an easy time finding players that teams are willing to trade. I mean, Orlando Brown was a unique situation, and the Chiefs gave up a lot for Orlando Brown. They gave up the value of pick 40. For Orlando Brown, and he was just average tackle play. And that's a situation that just doesn't come around very often.
Very few teams have two tackles they like, let alone a third, like somebody that they're willing to get rid of somebody, especially when they're young. And for the Chiefs, it's extra difficult because they like the most prototypical sized, athletic profiled offensive tackles, right? Like Orlando Brown's a little bit of an outlier because he wasn't a great athlete. He was just massive. So it made up for it. But like generally speaking, they want tall, thick, long-armed offensive tackles. You don't have many of those guys that can play on teams that aren't already playing. If you were a different team like the Green Bay Packers, for example, they actually get by with shorter offensive tackles that have shorter arms. They value slightly different stuff out of their tackles. So they haven't traded for them, but they are able to find guys later in the draft because they don't fit the prototype that the rest of the NFL is looking for. That's not the Chiefs. So if you want to find a young tackle, it's just really hard finding one that's going to fit their thresholds for another team, especially ones that we think, like that we know as fans on the outside that are available. It would be kind of surprising, I think, if they traded for a young tackle right now because we just don't know who they're going to be. Oh, you're muted, so we're just gonna hit another super chat from Jaron Mitchell. Trade a bag of chips for Evan Neal. Competition. Listen, I'm okay always with trading nothing for once promising players. I have watched Evan Neal play in the NFL. I don't see any reason to trade anything substantial for him. It's been pretty rough. Looks like he's very clearly going down like the Alex Leatherwood path where it just doesn't work. He just doesn't look like he gets it. But sure, if it is a bag of chips for him and you want to bring him in, have at it and see what shakes loose. It's just, it can't, I don't think you can make that move with the idea that he would be a solution.
Well, and yet, how does that fit within the plan of what you're trying to accomplish? Because your move can't be trade for Evan Neal and then we're done. You've got to have something else there. You've got to have something more substantial. You can't just bet that Evan Neal is going to be a guy all of a sudden. So how does that affect, your draft strategy, your free agent signings like that? I don't know if it plays in as much as it's just a project and maybe it works out and maybe a year in, or maybe he, takes off running here. Who knows? But that's a tough sell if your plan is just to make him your starting left tackle or something like that. Right. I think operating under the assumption, because like one of the things that's been really difficult for me, and I genuinely still believe, even with the Trey Smith news, that this is a very open-ended offseason for the Kansas City Chiefs. Like I see you've got so many key free agents out there that they, some that they need to bring back, and they got to figure out and make some decisions on who they're bringing back. Then, who, based on who they bring back, like that drastically affects the decisions that they make in the draft too. Like this is just such a unique offseason for the Chiefs, where just a couple dominoes falling kind of helps give you a path to how this thing is going to go and where it could be heading. Right. Ultimately the Chiefs prefer to have no holes. They want to be able to roll a team out before the draft that they feel comfortable, they think they can win some games with, and then try to, get better, as best as they can in the draft and take best player available when they can. Best player available at position of need. Like that's really what they try to do. But I think just operating under the assumption that Trey Smith is back in Kansas City in 2025, I think really does do a good job of helping set the course for the offseason a little bit. And so some dominoes are good, some dominoes are bad. I think one of the bad things that's falling as a result of this is Kingsley Suamataia probably not going to be in your starting lineup if you are allocating a ton of resources to one of the guard spots. So now you're probably not looking at Kingsley in year two finding a significant opportunity, right? It means you're probably, like we said, if you're paying Trey, you're probably not paying the tackle at a significant clip. You're probably not giving, you're not spending money on Ronnie Stanley, most likely, if Trey Smith is back either on a long-term extension or on the franchise tag. So those are pretty big key dominoes, but I think it even bleeds even more into the decisions that they have to make on the defensive side of the ball, Maddie, with Nick Bolton and with Justin Reed.
Well, yeah, I think bringing Trey Smith back, especially if he plays on the tag, which is going to be ridiculous if that's the case, that completely limits anything that you can do with a lot of those other guys. And it might mean you get to bring back neither of them. I understand that Chiefs can essentially make not an open-ended amount of cap space with whatever they decide, if they can figure out something to do with Travis Kelce, who is, still coming back, and we'll figure out what his contract, if there is any altercations to it, look like. And then with Patrick Mahomes, I understand they can make a lot of space, but if you have Trey Smith on the franchise tag, you're eating into essentially your entire budget, and you're going to have to play, the bargain bin to fill out this roster, because they are losing quite a few guys. So that's probably not an option. Even if they sign him to a long-term deal, I'm sure they will do a great job keeping his cap hit a little bit lower, but it's going to be a lot of cash being spent. We know the Chiefs and every team besides the Eagles apparently have a kind of limit on how much cash they want to spend in a given year. So that's going to eat either into the cap space or into their cash spending, which again limits how much you can do with other guys. So we'll just have to see. I think Trey Smith being back means it's almost a guarantee that you're not getting Justin Reed and Nick Bolton back, or you're not getting Justin Reed or Nick Bolton plus another higher end free agent. I don't want to say top end, just higher end free agents. Probably not. I would maybe even put Charles Omenihu in there. That might be a tight squeeze now that you also have Trey Smith on the books, right? So you're kind of down to picking the one other guy you want to go at. Trey Smith probably takes a spot of 1.5 people, right? If you were looking at the Chiefs going in this year, everybody has a different idea. I thought they could kind of add or pay two above average starters, whoever those were going to be. Trey Smith at that money probably takes 1.5 spots. So now you're getting pretty tight. You're going to have to get Nick Bolton in there, or Justin Reed, or Charles Omenihu, or somebody from outside. But like, I don't think you're bringing back multiple guys. So I think that's a big adjustment for a team that I do think wants to keep their defense as stable as they can. I just don't think they're going to have the money to bring back all three or even two of the three guys that they are now losing on all, one guy on each level of the defense.
Yeah, and I also wonder like what the domino effect is for Patrick Mahomes' restructure, because like, there has been times where the Chiefs have, pulled modestly from Patrick Mahomes' ability to restructure his contract, and basically they can turn some of his cap hit into a bonus and then spread it out over multiple years, and they pull that lever a lot. Give Patrick Mahomes a fat check every year in March, and then use the cap space to kind of help, figure out how to solve the problems of the teams. And last year it was a little bit more of a modest, it was more of a modest restructure. This year, I wonder if the restructure is a little bit more aggressive. Just kind of looking at, if they restructure the full amount, they can get $39 million in cap savings. And I'm not saying that that's going to be the case and that's what they're going to do, but they could do it if they wanted. With Trey Smith currently on the tag, that leaves them $21 million in cap space available, right? So now you're talking about you want $3 million in not just in space for the for the season, right? In case you want to make a move in the middle of the year, you want to add to your roster, you have to have a little bit of cap space to work with. You're going to have to pay your draft class. That's going to cost you a few $1 million against the cap as well. So now you're talking what? All right, if you want to sign a 1-year deal for a Hollywood Brown, if it's coming in at 8, all right, you don't really have all that much cap space to work with, right? So you're going to have to look towards, more modest moves. You're going to have to work towards trying to get something done with a Charles Omenihu on a multi-year deal, right? So that the cap hit in 2025 is low. That's where I think things are going to get really interesting. I'd be stunned, and I'd be stunned if Trey Smith plays on the tag personally. And that can kind of help fix the math a little bit. You don't have to restructure Mahomes as much, and then you can lower the cap hit for 2025 on Trey Smith by giving him more cash up front and getting him an extension that you can spread that bonus out across multiple years.
Can I hit you with a mini intrusive thought here? This is
Absolutely.
kind of it's adjacent to what we're talking about, but it's a little sidebar. I'm getting more and more concerned that the Chiefs are just kind of trying to run it back. And like, it's kind of a joke on a play on the words after that first Super Bowl, right? And the way everything went, but also like, I don't feel like, and they were in a tough position to do it, but it doesn't feel like they're trying to really churn over a roster that is getting very close to a point that you are going to have to hard turn it over. Your number one receiving option for the past decade was contemplating retirement and is now squeaking back one more year, but you don't really have the finances or the draft capital to just go out and make sure you replace that guy, right? Your defensive tackle that has been your best defensive player for years is getting a little bit further up there in age. Like, you do eventually got to have some kind of contingency plan for if Chris Jones does fall off the cliff, or if he does an Aaron Donald and just says, hey guys, I'm good now. I'm good to walk away. Like, I'm at that age now where I feel comfortable with what I've done and where I've been. I'm just not ready to do this anymore. You're losing the leader in the middle of your defense. You're losing the leader on the back end of your defense. You have an aging left guard who's been your best interior offensive lineman. Like, it feels like they're trying really hard to keep this band together, and it's easy to see the rationale. They just played for a chance to three-peat, right? You could very easily sell me that they believe in the building, that they had an off day for essentially the first time where they couldn't have an off day in 3 years, and it showed up in the worst possible way. I would say you're turning a blind eye to the fact that you had to win a bunch of one-score games, some of which I don't want to say you're lucky, but were by very, 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 very slim margins. And so it's just, I don't know. I'm getting just closer and closer to think they're just trying to say, hey, if we can keep as much of this roster together as we can, 15 will do enough, Andy will do enough, and we'll just get right back there and have another crack. And I can't say they're wrong. It's just, I really thought this was the time to really start setting themselves up to change to what the next version of the Chiefs are going to be. And I really feel like they might be trying to push it out another year and just run back the same unit.
I think you're onto something to a degree, but like I don't know if there's as much negative connotation. Like I do think that the turnover does tend to be just kind of coming from the draft, and then like they become like they have to have successful drafts, and like the reason this team has won Super Bowls largely is because they nailed 2021, they nailed 2022, and those two drafts were huge. And I mean, like 2023, look, they got Rashee Rice out of it. Like I'm not saying that 2023 is bad; it just was not 2022 good, and it wasn't 2021 good. I do think that the Chiefs are intent to just try to keep whatever players they believe the most in and try to keep them around as best as they can. Because I mean, like, again, like it's the same, like it's the left tackle problem. You're not going to be able to find Chris Jones. Your draft capital, your draft compensation is not going to be such that you're able to, find a player of great value somewhere else. You're not going to be able to just pull a Chris Jones or Chris Jones level player, even if you're getting pick 20 out of them or whatever the Chiefs could have, at some point. So yeah, I do think they're trying to hold on to what they have as much, and the Bills coming due in a different way than it ever has this year because of the volume of players. And like, that's where I think this strategy is going to be quite interesting, is because, there's been big decisions to make every offseason, and like the Chiefs have kept some players. Like they kept Chris again, even though he's going to be playing into his 30s. Now it's, well, can we, I think they want to try to run it back with as many of the players that they've had in the past, and then just hope that they can get, the fresh blood out of this from the draft.
Sure. And if you hit in the draft, I mean, it all works, right? Like if you start hitting multiple times in the draft over years, which they have, like that does work. Don't get me wrong. That's why I said, like, you can, and it's not like they were unsuccessful last year or anything like that. It just feels like they have a lot of very key pieces that are aging up to the point of retiring, getting to that performance cliff. And then also some of the young guys that they have hit on are coming up on their contracts being due. But when you're still paying the older guys too, you can't bring everybody back. And so it's just, it's all the timing of everything. And this just, to me, really felt like a logical year to get ahead of it. This felt like a year to jump out ahead. Oh, go ahead.
Well, let's talk about offseason dominoes, though, because the other big domino that's really hit, and like I think we talked about it in Wednesday, like the expectations that Travis Kelce is going to be back and all that. Travis Kelce coming in back and returning for the 2025 season, I think is a domino that falls that probably keeps you from trying to not blow things up or reset, whatever you want to call it, reset, blow things up or whatever. It kind of makes sense that the timeline of Travis Kelce, right or wrong, like, are they going to have Travis Kelce's year be a big transition year for them and a big roster turnover year for them? Or does it make more sense during Travis Kelce's swan song last season to try to keep the band together for one last run? And I could see the logic that they might have to say, you know what, Travis, we're going to try to keep, we're going to try to keep things together here. Not necessarily as a promise to Travis, but just like as a, logical progression is next year might make a little bit more sense to put Travis, to kind of harder reset, I guess would be the case.
Right. And I think the goal should be to avoid that. The harder reset. They should be preparing themselves, I think, at this point for that turnover. This is just where my mind is going. I think they are going to put themselves into a point to where they do have to hard reset if they don't essentially just hit in this draft, which they can. And if you hit in the draft, that's kind of not a cheat code, but like that's the preferred way to go. You want to come out of this draft with 7, 8, whatever players that are all starting right away and they're all good. You would have come out with the 2022 Chiefs draft or what, right? Like that's what the goal is here. And if you do that, it's all moot. But it's just, if that doesn't happen, if it's just like an average return on investment from this draft, and like, maybe not everybody that has shown a little bit of promise so far either starts to stall out a little bit or just be what they've shown so far. It's like paying this much money to the veteran guys and then losing the guys there on the free agency. It's setting them up to have to make a pretty big hurdle moving forward, when I think this was a very logical and good year to start that transition. Now, Travis Kelce just choosing to come back, they have no control over that. That does eat into that plan. When he's coming back, like, you can't pay him that much money and then also be like, let's prepare for next year. And then they're like, oh, we need to make sure the offensive line's as good as it can be. Let's pay Trey Smith a bunch of money. You can't be like, nope, we're going to put out a purposely worse offensive line so that Patrick Mahomes has to run around more. Like, I understand how they got there. It's just, I am a little getting just, intrusively nervous that they are going to run it back. Whether or not it results in a Super Bowl, it's going to result in a little bit harder reset than it had to if they started preparing for it now.
All right. I think the the dominoes have started to fall a little bit, and I love it. I'm excited to see the path that this team takes in the decision-making process and how they arrive at it, right? Like, these guys are, I mean, I always like to see the vision, like that's always fun. It's a fun reveal to see the vision for it. Now, let's kind of turn our attention to what just happened this week. The NFL Combine just got done on Sunday, and like, I think little nuggets and things from the athletic testing, the on-field performance, a lot of things kind of start to show themselves about the draft class a little bit more. And like we talked a little bit about it earlier when we were talking about the tackle class, like one of the big things I think we learned from the tackle classes, man, there's really not a ton of tackles, or potentially not a lot of tackles for this team where the arm length doesn't match what you would prefer. Like, I remember a couple of years ago, I think the year that the Chiefs wound up trading for Orlando Brown is the year. I think it was the year of the T-Rex is what I called it, where you just had a lot of shorter arm guys that didn't really stick up inside or outside and had to move inside, and that was kind of a theme. I think one of the big things, like we learned at the Combine, like there's some shorter armed tackles right now that may not be able to stick out there.
Oh, for sure. I mean, it wasn't never a great year for tackles. And then when you come out of it with, Will Campbell being below the NFL's traditional minimum of 33 inches, that's not a great look. Joshua Simmons, who's kind of like, everybody's like, oh, if he's healthy, this is the guy we all really like, right at 33 inches. Like, there's teams that won't play. The Chiefs don't like 33-inch length arms for their offensive tackles. And it's just almost everybody had shorter arms than you would prefer. It's not a great year for the talent of tackles. It's not a great year for size queens like the Chiefs when it comes to tackles. So like, I think we kind of exhausted that a little bit earlier. It's just coming out of the Combine, like, yeah, it kind of is what it is. And I think they realize that they're probably looking at, if they're adding an offensive tackle, it's probably somebody a little bit later in the draft. I do know, if somebody falls to them or whatever, they might take one early, but at this point, it just seems more likely that they would take one in the middle rounds or something like that, just to go for it.
A lot of the projects are that fit the mold of length and size are mid-round type players, or day two, day three type players, right? Like, and that's where things get kind of interesting with. And Logan Brown from Kansas is a right tackle, but you could look at Charles Grant from William and Mary. Like, he's a long tackle, but he's probably a day two guy. And I don't think he's ready. He's more of a project. I don't think he's a guy that you can drop into your offensive line on day one and say, all right, you're going from FCS to to the NFL. You didn't play in any of the all-star games, weren't able to test at full strength. Like, okay, Jalen Travis from Iowa State, like, that is a project through and through. And it's like, that's not a guy, he's probably a year away from being a year away. Another thing on the tackle market, you're on the tackle drafts. You talk about Joshua Simmons, like, I think there's a patellar injury, and like, I know you've been looking at that with him on the patellar injury side of it, and it's like, if Joshua Simmons, the Ohio State tackle, who some believe has top 10 tape, I think he has pretty close to top 10 tape. If he's available, it may not be a good thing. It may be because the patellar injury is something that's keeping him from, being able to be the same guy that he was.
Yeah, he tore his patellar tendon. It's not, from what I've seen, it's not as quite as bad as tearing your quad tendon, which is almost like a guaranteed loss of high-end explosiveness. But it's not great. It is one that you don't typically, not, it's the average person or even like average athlete doesn't return back to 100% health from this. So it's just worth knowing that this might be something that does impact how he moves or anything like that. And as much as somebody I like Joshua Simmons' tape, if you wouldn't tell me that all of a sudden now he's a little bit less explosive out of his stance with the rest of his athleticism that's there, which I think would be good. It was never great. That could become a little bit of an issue. And then you throw in the 33-inch arms, which again is enough for most teams, but like, there's enough casting of concerns there that maybe teams don't see him as a tackle either. I had seen people float his name as a guard looking at his build, he kind of looks like a guard. He has like the thicker lower half. He's like built a little bit squattier, not as lean as typically tackles are. Doesn't mean he can't. It's just, I can see how people going into the combine thought that. Now you run the risk of him being potentially less explosive than he was before. So yeah, it's just not a great tackle class to need a tackle, especially if you're the Chiefs drafting at the end of round 1. So like that, the combine, I guess, showed us that with the arm length, but like, I think even going into it, it was always going to be a little bit of a long shot to have a good tackle at the end of round 1. That's why, like, I mean, I'd still am okay. Like, hey, Chiefs want to draft Donovan Jackson from Ohio State there. Sure. I'm absolutely down for it. But even his arms came in a little bit shorter than what his high school measurements were and what everybody said they were going to be. So we'll just have to see what they feel about that.
Those high school measurements, man. Like
they had over 35 inches. But I mean, you know, they probably had like me out there measuring, not even me. They probably had another high schooler measure them.
Probably. That wouldn't. I mean, you've been saying
opposite shoulder blade to fingertip.
We've been saying you're 29 for 5 years now.
I turned 29 last year.
Okay.
Okay. Other combine takes.
Yeah, I was going to ask you. Give me another one.
Okay. This is combine and Chiefs draft related. I'm just going to kind of bundle this all together. Are you ready for another Brian Branch scenario where the clear best player on the board is Malachi Starks out of Georgia, sitting there at pick 31, and then the Chiefs have to sit there and look at him and decide, are they going to draft this guy that tested poorly in the athletic testing, but now, thanks to NFL's like combine IQ by AWS, we can see the miles per hour during all the drills. If you haven't gone it, go to like the NFL website and hit the combine IQ tab. Amazing stuff. You can see speeds and accelerations of people during like the actual drills. Guess whose name's in like the top 5 of every max speed of every DB drill? Malachi Starks. Well, guess who looked like the most fluid in almost every DB drill? Malachi Starks, just like Brian Branch, didn't test great. You watch the film, it's all there. You go out there and he's just super smooth during all the drills. So I am so ready for him to be there at 31 to say, you know what, just give me the best player in Malachi Starks. And the Chiefs to be like, maybe we should take a local kid.
Ariante Ursary.
Oh my God.
Another short-armed tackle. He did do well. Good job on him. As a local KC kid, played tackle at Minnesota.
He was the opposite. Great athletic testing, drill testing metrics, and look, whoo,
was tough. I think about like a couple like Will Johnson. I know people are down on too, and he had a little bit of a shorter arms, and the tape in 2023 was a lot better than 2024.
He's scared to run.
And the athletic testing was of concern. But I think about like the Starkses or the Jahdae Barons with the measurables, or
he gonna be gone.
Probably because he tested well.
He ran enough. Yeah, he ran enough, and like the hype was building. So the thing is, the South Carolina safety tested like a freak. Pronounce his name. Go ahead.
Nick Manwari.
Yeah, that one. He tested great, and it seems like the entire world is going to get, kind of like wool over the eye that he's a better safety than Starks because of the athletic testing. Okay, sure, have at it. But like safety 2 in this class, there's a chance that they both go off the board before the Chiefs pick. But I don't know. Safety 2 don't always or very traditionally get off the board. 2 of them in round 1. So again, I just think there's a good chance that Starks in particular all of a sudden sees a fall. And here's a guy that a lot of people had coming into this year, or even after his freshman year at Georgia, like, oh, that's a top 5 pick whenever he comes out. Now all of a sudden he's available there at the end of round 1, kind of like Brian Branch was a couple years back. So it's just, that's the big thing that came out to me of this is I wonder how many teams and people overreact to Starks testing on top of thinking a different safety is all of a sudden now better and he's available there. And just like, how do the Chiefs handle that? And do they pull the trigger or not?
Well, it's like, can the Chiefs be in a situation where they can take Malachi Starks comfortably and not try to chase Phil and the rest of their roster out too? Because like, that's one of the things and one of the questions I'm pondering as we're going through some of this is just like, okay, what can they get away with it? But like back to Starks and Will Johnson, the reason I was talking about that is like part of the reason Trent McDuffie fell to the Chiefs in a range that they were able to trade up for, and the talent was top 15, always was. Like just it was. The measurables weren't great. And so the length was a problem for a lot of teams. And he wound up being one of the best players in that entire draft. And the Chiefs got a tremendous steal and jumped in front of the Buffalo Bills, who had to play Kaiir Elam, who got absolutely torched by the Kansas City Chiefs in the AFC Championship game. Oh, and then the Bills and the Chiefs traded again, and the Chiefs got Xavier Worthy out of it. How did the Chiefs get Patrick Mahomes? I say all that to say, like, I would love to see the Chiefs be able to be in a position where they can just take a true best player available like a Starks, because that dude is like, he's got tremendous instincts, ball skills. Like, he is a game changer potentially in the back end of a defense. Like you talked about Brian Branch, just a matter of like, if they're going to be in a position to take a Malachi Starks or a Will Johnson, somebody like that, if this roster is even in a good place.
Yeah, no, that's good. And that's kind of where my mind has now gone since this. And listening, this is kind of like a Brett Veach and Andy Reid talking, specifically Brett. It seems like he's big on like, the defense is a lot better than the offensive class in the draft, which I think everybody had seen, but like just the way he kept going back to that, it really made me think, okay, maybe they do look a little bit more defense. This is also part of like Trey Smith's back. Maybe they're just going to get by at left tackle. I'm just like, I don't know. I've kind of built out like this image or this vision of what I think the Chiefs are kind of trying to shoot for maybe this year going into the draft. And that led to kind of my scare about running it back. But I also think it gives you clarity on the draft that there's probably a lean towards the defensive side, probably a lean towards the front seven, because we keep getting the defensive line is very good on the edges and the D tackles from Brett Veach, like every interview he does. But they're kind of situated as long as they can bring back a Humphreys or a Donovan Smith or pay any random left tackle that they think can start on week one. And then you do got to sort out your linebackers and safeties that left in free agency. But like, as long as you even just sign guys that are capable of walking out there in week one, which they don't need superstar playmakers anywhere, right? They just need guys that can go out there and start besides maybe that one leader on defense. You're situated to maybe take the best player available at pick 31. And well, I don't think this draft is great. I don't think this class is very good. I don't think pick 31 is a particularly good one. And I don't think it's going to be coveted by people trying to trade up for it either. So like, before we get to that, I don't think anyone's going to want pick 31, but being in a position to take the best player available, whether that is a safety, whether that is a linebacker, whether that is a wide receiver, is probably the best place they could put themselves in for this particular draft class. And that way, if a Starks falls, if I don't think the NFL is going to do it because he did test freaky, but if the NFL wants to super devalue linebackers and Jihad Campbell is there, if the NFL wants to devalue any defensive tackle that's worth going because he has significant character issues, but nobody wants to talk about what they are, and Walter Nolan's there, like there are guys that could be available at pick 31 that would make sense as long as you don't have to rush to fill a need.
I think one thing to pay attention to as well when you're looking at the draft and how the Chiefs can approach it and why they might look defense and like why Brett Veach keeps talking about defense is like, look at 2026 because the Bills coming due on the 2022 class in 2026. And so like, ideally you want guys that can help you fill a year ahead and like still contribute. Don't get me wrong, but you're also thinking heavily about a next year, the next season. And that's going to be important for the Chiefs to consider as well as they're going through all this. Is like they're going to lose all their corners. They're going to lose Leo Chenal potentially, and potentially McDuff. They're going to lose George Karloff potentially, or you're going to have to pay him $13 million or whatever whatever those fifth-year numbers are for Trent. You have to pay him. There's a lot. The Bills coming due, whether it's how expensive they get, whether you're losing them. A lot of those players are not going to be on the roster in 2026. So they got a lot of things to think about there. They're going to get more expensive. Yeah.
Because I know you're trying to get us out of here. Jaron hit us with another super chat. If Benjamin Morris falls, do they take the risk? I don't think Benjamin Morris being available at 31 is a fall. He wasn't playing his best this year before the hip injury, and come to find out that's his second hip surgery. He had one at the end of high school. And I don't know if they're related. I don't even know if they're the same hip, but you're telling me a cornerback who wasn't playing his best ball has had his second hip surgery now? I don't know. I get a little iffy about that. It's like, I think he was probably more slated as a day 2 gamble at this point in time, especially if he can't test before the combine. So like, we'll have to see how that plays out. The other thing I want to touch on coming out of the combine, this running back class is good. There's a lot of good players. I still have my hesitation that like, you're going to find a guy that the Chiefs should be chasing in round 4 or even at the end of round 3. Like, I still think that there's a pretty hard line of this is a 3-down back. This is a guy that actually matters versus, yeah, this guy's just maybe better than Isaiah Pacheco at 1 or 2 things, but not like he can completely take over and be your only single back all the time. But it's a good back. There's a lot of talented guys that they can probably find somebody in this draft. I'm also starting to wonder, because it is such a good draft, that this isn't the right time. I'd mentioned it before, to swerve, see what's available in free agency. See if one of those guys in free agency that's done with their team might be worth the pick here, because they do have other directions they can go. What you don't want is to be stuck there in round 3 or 4 and be like, oh, we have to get a running back. we have to draft one of these guys. You don't want to be stuck in that spot ever. So I'm interested to see what the Chiefs do with the running back spot coming out of this, because I do think that it's a great class. I would love to see them take one of those top 5 running backs to be their dude. But if you're not going to spend that investment, I don't know if it wouldn't be worth trying to play in free agency a little bit rather than just take your role player with a, round 3 or 4 pick.
Yeah, I'm with you. And maybe you can get a good value for the running back class or free agency class there. And then I wouldn't be stunned if they still pick one round 7 then, and it's somebody that can make this roster because I don't think the bar to clear is very, very high to make the roster in the running back room for the Chiefs right now. That is going to do it for this episode of the KC Laboratory. Thank you all so much for listening, watching, supporting us. We love you. We appreciate you. We'll catch you later. Over an hour.
Woo! Got it in there.
How about that?
Just a little nub.